All right, westward expansion. So it depends on how far back if you had an LEQ or DBQ they wanted to go. Usually when they start talking about westward expansion, they're talking about the 1800s. Usually is the time period you are associating with westward expansion. By the 1890s, the U.S. government, the Census Bureau, you know the census that's taken every 10 years, they come out and they make a statement in the I think it's after the 1890 census, and they say, so far as they can tell, every part of the United States has been settled. And what they mean by that is not every square inch, but there is so few places that remain vast, unsettled territory that they've said Americans have really expanded across the country. This is what prompts, and this is a classic, they'll take excerpts of writing by a guy named Frederick Jackson Turner. Did I ever Jackson Turner? So Frederick Jackson Turner takes this census publication, and what he does is in it would be 1892 and 1893, that's 1893, he gives a speech over and over again at the Chicago World's Fair in which he talks about what that means. So he says, the census has said that we've expanded across the country from sea to sea. What does this mean? It's called his frontier thesis. We have pushed the frontier, like the edge of settlement, back and back and back and back and back. What does it mean when we now have pushed the frontier from border to border? And he kind of forecasts the fact that we're going to look beyond our borders to other and opportunity, and he talks about it as far as like land to obtain. And so the Frederick Jackson Turner thesis is seen as kind of the culmination of this westward expansion. So just to get your time frame in there, that doesn't mean that there's not expansion in the 16 and 1700s. But by 1763 represents the proclamation line. Do you remember this? Yeah. It is caging westward settlement along here. So this would be 1763 in this proclamation line. Now, there were people going out beyond the proclamation line and defying that order. But this is the region where it is considered the extent of colonial settlement, and this is by even by 1800, that's considered the line where most settlement is east of that line. This also corresponds with the Appalachian Mountains, and that's considered the boundary line. French territory before 1863 would be in like the Michigan area, along the Mississippi, the Louisiana area. The French would own this vast swath of area, although it was largely unsettled in here, which would be the Louisiana Territory. They would own territory up in Canada, although it was very sparsely populated for the most part. The Spanish owned Florida. The Spanish owned vast tracts of land, which would be Texas and this region up in here. Okay? So that's the picture in the late 1700s and around early 1800. The next big development is going to be in 1803, in which we purchased the Louisiana Territory from France. Do you remember this? Yeah. In 1803, we doubled the size of the United States, and so by 1803, this Louisiana Territory looks something like this, and it follows the Mississippi along here. After the French and Indian War, part of the Treaty of Paris, 1863, which is what ends the French and Indian War, the French relinquish all of their territory along here in the Ohio Valley, so they are removed for the most part from mainland North America. But the British forces aren't perfect, but they're close enough. But after 1803 is when we start seeing the gradual migration into these areas. For the Missouri and Iowa, barely nothing. But where a lot of the early part of the 1800s and 1790s is going to be into this Northwest territory, which would be considered like Minnesota. Chicago would be located in Detroit. Not a huge city, but it's an old French fur trading city originally. And so you get a lot of settlement into this Northwest territory, as well as some settlement along here. This is considered not the most ideal land in here, but then you also get cotton that expands along the south, and southern colonies are going to be expanding greatly along this cotton belt down there. By the early 1800s, by the first decade, Lewis and Clark are commissioned to explore this new Louisiana territory, and they detail and map out a lot of this area, which is the Louisiana Purchase. Did we talk about Lewis and Clark at all or no? Lewis, yeah. And so they explore all the way from here all the way out into here. This is disputed territory, Oregon. The Oregon Territory is disputed between us and the British for a while. I got to figure out, I think 1844 is when, 1845 is when we 1846, hash out a treaty with Great Britain. 1846. And so that's going to be under Polk. He actually runs on the campaign. Texas and all of Oregon is what he's campaigning when Polk runs for president. Yeah.
So was he going to say 54-40 or fight?
Yep, 54-40 or fight is the campaign slogan. And 54-40 is somewhere up here. It's a parallel line. The compromise was here, and I don't know, this is probably like 48 something or so. I don't know what parallel this is, but they were advocating to get all of this territory up into here. We wound up negotiating some type of compromise. Yeah.
Clay lose to Polk in that election?
Yeah, Henry Clay lost to Polk in that election. And Henry Clay is going to lose to John Quincy Adams in 1824. He's going to lose again to Jackson in 1832. He's going to lose again to Polk in 1844. Is there any other? I think those are the three elections he loses. He might have been another candidate in one of the other ones. But Henry Clay is the perennial loser in the mid-1800s. Well, this fest really ramps up in the 1840s and 1850s. And it also parallels a big immigrants, a lot of Irish immigrants from Scotland. You have, did I say Germans? These are the considered immigrants of the early or the first half of the 1800s. Mississippi and places like Missouri. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So Milwaukee, I'll just give you a quick example. Milwaukee's baseball team is the Brewers, right? And Anheuser-Busch, that's a German brand. I mean, there's a lot of, and I'm not saying all Germans are making beer. It's not the only thing they're doing. But these are all German ties. The first, and this is a good thing to know, the first major expansion way westward is not to California. It's not to the deep southwest. It is out to Oregon via the Oregon Trail. It's out into here. And this is happening, I think the peak of the Oregon Trail is happening in the 1840s and 50s. You have a lot of people, not a lot, but some people. You also get a shoot-off, and a lot of people end up here. Do you know who they are? No. Huh? Yeah, it's Utah. And Mormons, right? So this is 1850s. I think the Mormons, can someone check on when Salt Lake City is up and running? Yeah.
I had a question. Was this charged by manifest destiny?
Was this what?
Charged by manifest destiny.
Charged. No. So let's that's a great question. People are moving for opportunity. That's why they're moving. Either things suck where you are, or you're hoping it's going to be better where you go. That's why you move. It's not because I feel like manifest destiny. Like I just feel like moving and putting my flag down because, damn it, I can. It's less about that and more about opportunity and the chance. Historians later called that feeling of wanting to take opportunity and settle and live on my own land and make my own living, they called that manifest destiny. It would be like if I said, in 30 years from now, pretend it's 2045, right? It's 2045. Historians look back and said, you know, the first year 10 was the decade of the iPhone. We're going to call those kids the iPhone generation. iPhone manifestation decade. It's not because you manifestation now. It's a thing that we're categorizing later. Go ahead.
Isn't that driven by like their belief that
So that's a justification. There is a genuine belief that, you know, we are better than, we are the best, the cream of the crop. America is the place to be. And so government policymakers and people that are living there and becoming American citizens, they are kind of embracing this idea that, yeah, we should be able to sell this land. We should make, it's just being sitting and not being used and wasted to develop, you know, and make this country great. Yeah.
it says Salt Lake City was founded in 1837.
So perfect. Right in the 1840s, right around 1850. So by the 1850s, Salt Lake City is becoming the hub for the Mormons. Remember the Mormon, the person who founds the Mormon religion? Do you remember him? Joseph Smith, not John. So remember, John Smith is colonial governor of Virginia. Joseph Smith. And then Joseph Smith is murdered. He never makes it to Salt Lake City. He is murdered in, I think, Illinois or Indiana. And Brigham Young is the person who leads them on this journey out to Salt Lake City. And he's the one, that Brigham Young University, have you heard BYU? BYU University. Anyways, that's the university that's still there. And so this is the 1840s, 1850s. Oregon Trail, a lot of people going westward. What's causing them to go westward? Some is immigration, immigrants that are looking for cheap land. This land is considered cheap out here. It's offered at cheap prices. Second thing is we start seeing the more and more common appearance of textile factories up in this region. Factory life can be very dreary and boring. And we said, remember by the 1860s, the Industrial Revolution is humming along in the United States. 1820s, we see the first, 1820s, we see the first textile factories. The Lowell Textile Girls, that's 18 teens, 1820s. And so some people, as opposed to the factory life, let's go and move out and try our hand at farming or cattle ranching or whatever it's going to be and try and make a life for yourself where you're not working from dusk till dawn, breathing in cotton fiber infested air. You're moving out. Another one would be farmers. This soil around here, progressively throughout the 1800s, throughout 1830s, 40s, and 50s, is over-farmed. It's over-farmed. And when farming is really pushes word settlement in the South, throughout the belt and here. So there's several factors. It's not just one. Some is immigration. Some is people west. Save a lot of make it out west, and that's pushing this immigration. Yeah.
Did you also say like government is another big part in why people are moving out west?
Sure. If where you live is being governed, you move out and settle a new territory and a new settlement, and you can form whatever kind of government you want to. Yeah, Chris.
So would this be like around like the Homestead Act and like railroads and stuff?
So this immigration really speeds up, and I'm going to talk next. Once the railroads are built that connect east to west, but there's one more piece to this that we have to put in here. The other piece to this. So this is, we said 1763. This would be 1803. And then the big one comes, next big one comes in 18. Something like that. In 1848. And this is the end of the Mexican-American War. This is considered the Mexican Cession Territory. Cession, the Mexican Cession Territory. It is what will become Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, part of Colorado, Nevada, and Utah. All are incorporated in the Mexican Cession Territory. Yeah.
Wasn't Texas annexed 3 years earlier?
It was. But we still took it from Mexico. So the question is, what about Texas? Technically, this was first annexed in 1845. This came in 1848. Not that you would ever have to know that. That's real specific. And then you have more push and pull factors. Gold is discovered in California, the gold rush. A lot of people rush out there to try and make it rich. Cotton farmers want to expand into Texas and begin planting cotton and bringing slavery into Texas. You're not going to get a lot of settlement out in the Southwest, not until more irrigation is going to happen, which is going to be later on, and federal funding for irrigation. But after this, lots of room to, I think Chris was asking, the railroads. The railroads are going to be built in the 1860s. The first transcontinental railroad is built from, finished in the, it's called the Union Pacific Railroad. It is built by largely Irish immigrants building from this way and Chinese immigrants building this way. It ran from Omaha connected to parts of the West. So you really start seeing increased settlement. There is a lot of precious metals found in places like Colorado, Wyoming, even some of the Dakotas, silver specifically. That sets up the settlement of mining towns. Did we talk about those miners? Who settled the West? Farmers, miners, and cowboys. The cattle ranching is going on in Texas, and you get these like cattle ranching cities that all depend on herding cattle north to these railroad towns in places like Dodge City and places like Lawrence. What was I going to say? But the biggest settlers in the 1850s and 60s of this region in here are going to be farmers. They are trying to make their life farming. A lot of people that come and farm are going to be immigrants that are coming to the United States. A lot of them are going to be people who do not want to work in factories and want to make their land farming. The Homestead Act is passed in 1860, I think it's 1862, so it's like right during the Civil War. It's passed by an all-Republican Congress. The Homestead Act gives cheap land. It's like $20 for, I don't know, $5 for 20 acres or 40 acres or 6. It's cheap land for people to come out and farm. And you have to, the requirements are you have to farm it and you have to improve it. So you can't just like buy it and hold on to it and sell it. What they were worried about is Teresa's rich, right? She's wealthy. She's a banker. You run a very successful bank in the Northeast. All this cheap land's offered. You know that this is going to be valuable one day. If you buy up 1,000 acres and don't do anything with it, they didn't want that. Just hold, that's called speculating. They didn't want speculation. They wanted to have the land being settled and really stimulate the economy. Now, this is all fine and dandy. Some people do really well with this. But then you go through a string in the late 1860s, 1870s, and really the 1880s where you have some pretty terrible years of farming, and it's real easy for farmers to lose everything. Farming by the 1870s is becoming more mechanized. You need machines, big steel plows. John Deere is a company that's going to get its name in the late. You increasingly have big loans from banks to start their farms, and if you can't make the payments, what do they take? The farm from you. And so a lot of people that are going to go out and try their hand at farming wind up losing everything and having to in the 80s, they start working together. How can us farmers demand things from Washington, D.C. and our government officials? We're being ignored. The big business monopoly of, when we discuss the different industries that were being dominated by these venture capitalists, these robber barons. So people like, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt with the railroads. You could talk about the meatpacking industry with guys like Swift, Gustavus Swift. They are having so much influence in politics, we're not being heard. And that's where you see farmers start forming organizations to help themselves out. The first is called the Grange. It's like a social club for farmers in which they try and help each other and help provide loans to themselves, things like that. And then after that, it's the Farmers Alliance. Farmers Alliance is in the 1870s. The Farmers Alliance works to negotiate with the railroad companies, so the railroad companies can't screw over individual farmers. They also try and get people elected in state governments to help farmers and farming policies. And then the Farmers Alliance will later merge into what? The Populist Party, and that's the 1880s, 1890s. Early 1890s is the Populist Party that is going to really make an attempt to unite farmers and Eastern wage workers on the Eastern in the Northeast under one umbrella. And they have success, but they don't have enough success. 1892, the populist candidate gets 1 million votes. I think his name's Weaver, James B. Weaver. We'd have to check that out. And in 1896, the populist candidate and the Democratic Party merge. It's William Jennings Bryan. So the Democrats back the guy who's pretty much a populist, and William Jennings Bryan and William McKinley square off in a big-time important election. Had William Jennings Bryan won that election, things would have been very, very different in America. He was arguing that we needed to coin silver, so silver could be an accepted form of currency in the United States. That would have made money easier to come by. It would have caused inflation. If you have more money, it causes inflation, which would have wealthy bankers and wealthy business owners. It would have helped people who are in debt and trying to pay off. If money is easier to come by, it helps you. William Bryant lost. He lost. McKinley wins 1896, and that's important because McKinley is going to be the one that is going to be president during the Spanish-American War. He's going to be the one that decides that we need to take the Philippines and that we are going to take the Philippines and annex them. We don't annex them. We take it as a territory. He's going to be the one to decide on the direction of our country and be a Republican that continues supporting big business, continues supporting over. And then McKinley's assassinated after he's reelected in 1900. And who takes over after McKinley's assassinated? Teddy Roosevelt. That's something that you should know. Teddy Roosevelt. So, any questions about the westward expansion bit? Ari, do you have any other questions of the other things we covered? Anyone else have any questions? This is the time to ask. Now, the one last part that I would say with the expansion, while this is all happening, Native Americans are on the losing end of this expansion process. Native Americans are gradually pushed back this way, and we could take a look as early as the 1830s with the Indian Removal Act. You are going to see Native Americans being forced off their land by U.S. government, U.S. legislatures mandating that they are. In fact, the Supreme Court in the late 1820s actually ruled in favor of Native Americans. I don't know if you remember this. There's a Supreme Court case called the Cherokee Nation versus the United States, or the U.S. versus the Cherokee Nation. And Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall and the other Supreme Court justices rule in favor and say, no, the Cherokee Nation is an independent nation. They have right to this land, And you cannot just force them to get out and be removed. And that's what Andrew Jackson says, his famous line, John Marshall's made his ruling, now let him enforce it. Basically saying, like, fine, he ruled that, I don't care. I don't give a crap about their ruling. He's not the commander-in-chief of the army. Let him try and enforce that ruling. And then Congress passes the Indian Removal Act. Native Americans are removed. Choctaws and Creek and Cherokee are removed, sent to what would be Oklahoma later on, and that's the Trail of Tears. After the railroad's built in the 1860s, we increasingly get Native Americans being rounded up into reservations here and down here, and even some out here. So there's three main places: the Dakotas, Oklahoma, and Southwest. And the top late 1860s and 1870s corresponds to the Native American Wars, the Plains Wars. Did we talk about the Plains Wars? And the Army is fighting a very much hit and run throughout the 1870s. You see battles like Wounded Knee, you see battles like Custer's Last Stand, you see battles, Wounded Knee's in 1890, so that's one of the last ones. It's considered the end of the Plains Wars. You see things like I have to read the Creek map. It's an account written by a lady named Helen Hunt Jackson. I think she was on your test at one point. She writes this book called A Century of Dishonor, and she writes about the Sand Creek Massacre, in which the U.S. government somewhere out in here, I think it was in Colorado, sent a letter out to the local Native tribe saying, we are going to escort you to your relocation reservation. Please come to this place. You will be protected, and we will be relocating you within weeks. And the Native Americans came. Many of them came there. And for some reason, the U.S. troops got orders to just fire on the Native American camps. And men, women, children are just slaughtered at Sand Creek. You also have stories of Native Americans slaughtering U.S. soldiers and scalping them and dismembering bodies. It is brutal. It's brutal, brutal stuff. Yeah?
Wasn't there one where there was like a whole bunch of people like set up outside of like camps, and then they like I don't know if like the troops thought like some Native Americans like fired on them, and then like other people started firing, and then just kind of like broke out.
So there is, the one is the Battle of Little Bighorn, in which General Custer, who was a Civil War general, he orders his men, it's a cavalry unit, so it's people on horses, to charge a Native American encampment. They thought there was only a couple hundred Native Americans there. Turns out it was an encampment of about 1,000 Native American warriors. I mean, this was not a community of Native American men, women, and children. It was just mostly warriors. And they got slaughtered. Every single one of them died. Every single one of Custer's men. It's called Custer's Last Stand. And it's the Battle of Little Bighorn? I don't know why that doesn't sound right. Battle of Little Bighorn. Little Bighorn. Battle of Little Bighorn. And so these are the Plains Wars. And then, the very tail end of the Plains Wars, 1887. 1887, there's a shift in U.S. policy in which we're not going to round them up and place them onto reservations. Throughout the 1890s, we begin forcing them to assimilate. And this law is the Dawes Act. Do you remember this? 1887 is the Dawes Act. And it's forced assimilation. You no longer are going to be Cherokees, or you're no longer going to be Sioux Indians. Tribal status. Land owner. Which, by the way, takes away a lot of land. They lose like some 40% of their land that they were originally guaranteed. And it provides a path to citizenship. 25 years. And the Dawes Act is going to be the predominant policy until the New Deal, in which the New Deal, there's a change. The Dawes Act, under the Dawes Act and these policies of assimilation, what are you looking at, Brendan? Are you trying to...
No, I was
Oh, okay, you're good. I thought I could clarify something for you. There are schools opened in places like Pennsylvania, boarding schools, in which Native American children are taken and sent to places like Pennsylvania boarding schools to learn how to become American-like. They're taught to read and write. They're taught to learn the Pledge of Allegiance. They're taught to, and they are then sent back to their families and say, hey, go teach your people American ways. Yeah.
Were they given the land after 25 years since they weren't really citizens?
I think the land was still given to them. I think they still owned the deeds of land, but they could not vote. They couldn't participate in any political type of thing. But I think they still own the deeds to the land. I don't think you have to be a U.S. citizen at that time to own a plot of land. But they are not going to be guaranteed any of the rights and liberties and political opportunities of voting until they're citizens. Yeah.
So, with Oklahoma, was that not even like a state then?
No, it was not. Oklahoma is actually one of the last state, one of the, not last, but one of the later states. If you remind me, I'll show you the political map, 270towin.com. I'll show you the political map, and you can see statehood, and you'll see that Oklahoma is one of the later states to come into the Union. It was a Native American reservation, a big one, and it got smaller and smaller, and people moved in there, especially when the slavery question was being brought up about being able to plant cotton and bring slaves into the southern territories. Yeah.
Once the Indians got like certain Indians got citizenship,
Yeah.
and they had children, but their children citizenship.
Yes. And it's important to know that many of the Native Americans didn't want to abide by U.S. customs and rules, nor did they want citizenship. And I know that sounds weird. Someone asked me in my first year of teaching, and I never really thought about this question. And they said, Mr. Epler, were Native Americans forced to remain on reservations after the Dawes Act? Like after individual land was mandated and tribal status was dissolved, why didn't they just leave and go get jobs or move to cities? And I think part of it is because he basically was saying, like if it was so bad on the reservations, why stay there? And I think part of it has to do with the fact that Native Americans have never wanted to integrate. I don't want to lump all Native Americans into the same box. A majority of Native Americans have never wanted to assimilate and integrate into U.S. society. They just wanted to be left alone. They wanted to be left to their traditional ways of life, especially these Plains Indians, their nomadic ways of hunting, and that's something that even still to this day exists. Native American reservations. Has anyone ever been to Soaring Eagle Casino? Right, the Chippewa tribes. The Native American tribes still kind of operate as semi-autonomous peoples and civilizations. And I think it's something that's hard for us to kind of comprehend and wrap our heads around because it seems like, well, why wouldn't you just, join U.S. society? But that goes against pretty much all Native American thinking and philosophy. The United States is kind of founded on using up our natural resources and producing a lot of stuff and becoming powerful and rich and making progress. Native Americans their society and culture is not all about becoming rich and powerful and using all of the natural resources that are available to you. It's more about existing and living, not beyond your means, but the only things that you need. And it's a total different philosophy. Good question. Any other questions on this? Yeah.
Do like Native Americans and like reservations today? Do they have like are they like mostly citizens still? Can they still be citizens and like be on the reservation?
Yeah, so they can still be American citizens and still be part of the reservation. Absolutely, yes. And there still are opportunities afforded by our government to Native Americans. Our government still pays money to Native American reservations in aid. There are scholarship opportunities for people who have Native American blood or of Native American descent to go to college and things like that. However, I can tell you, I think I said this on Friday or some other day, the review session, if we're looking at the whole scale of things, like how nice we've been to Native Americans versus how terrible things we've done to Native Americans, the scale is very much so tipped towards terrible treatment. You know what I mean? So yes, those things exist, but the ledger isn't quite equal. I would say.
Matt McNabb, 25%.
Who?
Matt McNabb.
Okay.
So he gets college paid for.
He does get college paid for. And I think a lot of us, oh my gosh. Trust me, there are, if you take all of the totals of people in the United States and you take a look at average income of Native American people of, Native American heritage, maybe 50% or more, income to I don't think we'll have time to watch it. Maybe remind me after the AP test. Did I show you guys ever a TED Talk at the beginning of the year? I never. About single story, danger of a single story. You remember those TED Talks? There's a TED Talk by a guy named Aaron Huey, and he is a fanatic Native American rights supporter. He's not Native American, but he is all about giving back land to Native Americans that we've taken. So, I mean, if this is the spectrum and this is like, I can't stand Native Americans, I think we should deport all of them from the country, and this is, I think we should kick every white person of white European ethnicity out of the country and give every piece of land back to Native Americans that they technically owned. Do you see the two extremes? Aaron Huey's probably here. But he does a TED Talk where he goes into the Pine Ridge Native American reservation, Sioux, Lakota Sioux, and he does the whole TED Talk through pictures, just photography that he snapped. It is one of the poorest places you've ever seen. It breaks your heart to watch it. At least me, and not everyone. In fact, one of the questions I got from that kid my first year was like, I don't feel bad for them. Why don't they just leave? And it shocked me. I didn't know what to say to it. But regardless of, it's worth a watch. You could see he goes through. He says, crime rates, poverty rates, child mortality rates, cancer rates, and he compares it to the nation as a whole. And he says, this is what it is on Pine Ridge. This is a legacy that has been carried on since the first settlers were kicking Native Americans off their land. He basically makes the argument that if you continue kicking people off their land and continue giving them the worst parts of land, you're never going to win the game. It's like if you're playing cards and you have a decent hand to start and someone takes all of your aces and kings and queens and gives you 2s and 7s and 3s, you're never going to win in a poker game, right? And you make the cards out and you re-deliver them out, you're always going to have a losing hand. If we're playing war and you only has 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s, and I put myself the pile that has a couple 5s, some 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, jacks, queens, kings, and aces, I'm probably going to beat you every time. There's going to be very few wins for you. So that's his argument that he makes. It's called the name. There's some bad words in it. It's not really appropriate for school, but I show it anyways, usually, because I don't care. I do care. Gilded Age. Do you guys want to take a quick break? Water, stretch. Let's take a stretch break. I'll pause this. This is another 40.